I don't know if you have had failed relationships in the past, if you have trauma, if you have coping mechanisms that you're like, why am I doing these things? I want to love better. Listen to this week's episode. Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bought and Beloved podcast. As always, it's your girl, Kirby Kelly, back at it again, and this week I have an incredible guest. My friend, Stefanie Rouse, is joining me, and we're actually going to be talking about the book that her and her husband co-wrote together, and it's called Wholehearted Love. Overcome the barriers that hold you back in your relationship with God and others, and delight in feeling safe, seen, and loved. But before we even unpack everything that they wrote, I mean, we can't get into everything because it's a long book and it's a good book and they go into so many awesome topics. But before we dive into what we do talk about today, I would love for Stefanie to introduce herself and just let you all know a little bit about her, Caleb, and everything that they are up to in their life right now. So take it away, Stefanie.
Hey, Kirby, and everyone listening. I'm so honored to be on your amazing podcast. It's so fun to hang out with you. And yeah, so I'm Stefanie. I've been married to my amazing husband, Caleb, for almost 11 years. In July, it will be 11 years. And we we just love Jesus and we love each other so much, and we love sharing with other people to encourage their relationships, whether they're single and to prepare beforehand, or in marriage and just getting to see people throughout the world having more fulfilling relationships with God, others, and themselves, as Caleb and I keep navigating that ourselves as well. So that's what we love to do online, and with our clients that we get to see them on Zoom, and we have little groups, get to meet with them and mentor them. So yeah, it's really fun, and love getting to share about our book and talk to you today.
Yes. So speaking of the book, you two co-authored this together, and I think that is so cool, especially because it is about love and relationships. I mean, it goes beyond that. It really does take like an introspective look at what it looks like to love God and to love yourself, not in like the superficial, way that we kind of see in our culture today that just negates a lot of what scripture says, but truly like knowing and loving and honoring the way that God made you. So I just want to know what was that process even like? Like where did this book idea come from? Why did you both want to go about it together? What's kind of the backstory with that?
Yeah. Oh, so early on in our marriage, even in our dating, we just, when we met each other, we just felt like we were able, like God unlocked our hearts, like both of our hearts, and we were able to love so much more wholly than we ever had, like in a wholeness sense, I guess, holy in a way too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
WH.
But I remember just some disappointing things happening, even in our first year of marriage. Just, like you think marriage is one way, and then life happens, and it's just, we just got hit with a lot of things. And I remember all these different crossroads where both of us, like after an argument or after something that happened, that I just felt like the enemy saying, close off your heart. And I didn't know it was the enemy at the time, but just like kind of shut down that part that's like that full, like, I love you unabandonedly because you need to protect it because this is hard and this person is, could hurt you. And there are so many times that voice has tried throughout our 11 years of marriage and just in relationships to hinder us from loving each other wholeheartedly. But I remember even a moment in our first year of marriage, I've never shared this before, but when you said that, this came up, that I was like, that God was really calling me, and Caleb calling me, like, I want the fullness of who you are, no matter what that means. Like, no matter how scary that is or how intimidating that is to show to God or to your spouse or to other people, and then making that decision and feeling like that those walls I was building just crumble down. And I see that so many times in my work with my clients too, that they've built up these walls to, and the book talks about, like, a lot of times for a reason, for a season, but that sometimes those same walls can hinder us from wholly loving, like fully loving God and loving
Mm-hmm.
other people, the right ones. So that kind of, Caleb and I would talk
Mm-hmm.
about that a lot. There was moments both of us had that and be like, we want all of you, like we want all of you. We don't just want part of
Mm-hmm.
you. And we talked about so many times like how amazing it would be to write this book together to get to share that with others as we've gotten to help so many of our clients through a lot of the concepts in this book. So, yeah, that's where it came
Mm-hmm.
from a little bit.
That's awesome. And I love that you mentioned that like here at the beginning because when I was reading the book, when you go into a book, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm assuming that this is what the person's going to be talking about. And so for me, when I read your book, I was like, okay, this is probably going to be like a how to love somebody guide. And I mean, you do talk about that, like how do we love other people well and in a godly and a biblical way, and in the way that Christ loves us and the way that Christ calls us to love other people. But you touch a lot about that of healing, like in order to wholly, like WH or H, honestly, holy or
Yep.
holy, love somebody. There's a lot of healing that has to happen so you can love people fully. And I was not that I don't want to say I was surprised by that, but like it was so good. I wasn't expecting the book to go to the places that it went to, and it really did minister to me because even as somebody who is married, like I know this book is for so many people, and we can talk about that next about maybe who it's for and like what kind of scenarios and areas that this book speaks into. But for me, even as like a married woman who's going to into her fourth year of marriage in the fall, it really ministered to me of like, wow, there are areas of my life where I need to be wholly and fully showing myself to my husband and loving my husband and letting the guards down, and that the trauma has influence and that the pain has influence and that misconceptions and toxic thoughts and all these things have influenced. And so I really benefited from a lot of what your book said. And I'm sure that there's so many people out there who are in different seasons and different scenarios that will glean truth and practical things from this book. So who is this book for? Like, is it for the single people? Is it for the dating people? Is it for the engaged, the married people? Like what people, what seasons, what scenarios are the readers maybe going through that this book is going to speak
Yeah, I
to?
love that, Kirby. Thank you for saying that about just the way the
Yeah,
book has impacted you. That's just like the amazing. It's
it's
so
true.
powerful
Mm-hmm.
to hear. What a gift. Yeah, so when we wrote this book, we work with clients both that are single and married. And really,
Mm-hmm.
anyone that has gone through something that is hard, disappointing, that feels traumatic, that feels any sort of loss, that
Mm-hmm.
they've gone through that and it's impacted their life in whatever way. And maybe sometimes you can see positives that it's affected their life, or
Mm-hmm.
ways that they, like in the book, we talked about coping, that sometimes those things can come out. It's like, okay, well, because of this, it
Yeah.
helped me build this big business because I got to put all this time and effort into that because I didn't care about relationships anymore because of this heartbreak. But it's really for anyone that has
Mm-hmm.
walked through anything disappointing and doesn't want that to define the rest of their life, and doesn't want it to define the way that they see God and that they see themselves and that they see others. Instead, having the tools in order to help get closer to seeing themselves the version that God sees them, to see other people closer to the way that God sees other people, and to see God more fully and wholly who he actually is, versus the way that disappointment can cloud our vision and can put scales
Mm-hmm.
over our eyes. So I believe that it's really great for single people that have gone through those things, but also really great. I've seen so much great breakthrough in a lot of my married clients and people reading this that are unlocking parts of their hearts in order to have a better relationship with um, their husband or wife. Because, Caleb works with a lot of men, and he's had so many men that have had really
Mm-hmm.
difficult relationships with their wives have more beautiful relationships with them. And a lot of single men that he's worked with that he's been able to see that have been discouraged and had a hard time. And he talks about some of the scenarios, and same with the women that
Yeah.
they've gone through hard things, and just seeing the transformation because their vision has changed on the way they see God, themselves, and others through the tools that this book shares.
Well, you mentioned, and I have my notes right here, so if I look to the side, that's what I'm doing. But you mentioned in your chapter from coping to connecting. You brought up that word, and that's something that I wanted to talk about because that chapter was really good. You explain, or the book explains. Maybe Caleb was writing in this part, but I know y'all kind of go back and forth in the book. But one of y'all explains how we often wear masks to fit in, but we will also wear masks to protect ourselves when it comes to relationships. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about this and how this relates to wholeheartedly loving God, others, and ourselves rightly? Because I think this is something that a lot of us do, whether it's again to fit in or to protect ourselves. Like, what do y'all talk about in that specific
Yeah.
chapter?
I remember telling a story, I think it's in this chapter, just how I had this desire to be wanted, and I had this deep, the lie underneath, the toxic thought that I wasn't good enough. And the way to be good enough,
Mm-hmm.
and the way to be, and I wasn't lovable enough. So if I got enough attention and admiration, that maybe I would be good enough. Like, and maybe also I would be loved. And um, for me as a teenager, that meant, putting on a ton of makeup and wearing skimpy clothes and putting like body mist in the air and walking through it was called Love Spell.
The Victoria's Secret. Yeah. I remember that. I remember reading that.
And walking through it and just be like, yes, this will be the love spell, and just be, and kind of have this persona that, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I have it all together. I'm, beautiful and confident, and I can attract who I want to attract. And that was the mask that I wore. Underneath that, I was so insecure.
Mm-hmm.
I was really longing for love. I was looking for, these deep levels of insecurity and pain to be healed. And it was getting, wearing that mask, it got part of what I wanted. I got attention, and I got a superficial sort of love. But I was never actually known and loved to the parts of me that wanted to be. And so a lot of times our mask, it provides a superficial sometimes way of coping. It also helped me with an artificial sense of confidence, so that it protected me for a season, for under certain ways that I acted that detracted certain people, or it made me feel safer in some ways. But again, it was just for a season, and it wasn't going to help me find someone that truly knew me and actually cared about who I really was, versus just the persona that I was portraying.
So when it comes to people who are kind of like living with this mask on and they're maybe contemplating, I want to take this mask off. I don't want to live this way anymore, like live fake and try and fit in or protect myself. But they're afraid of like what's underneath. I mean, you talked about it, like insecurity and all these, maybe even the lies that we're believing, these toxic thoughts that we have, or just the way that we're perceiving ourselves. How do we actually take off that mask, and what does it look like to address maybe those parts of us that we have been covering up? Like, can we heal those parts? Do we have to address those parts? What does that even look like on a practical
Yeah,
level?
definitely. Well, I think one of the first steps is just is recognizing some of those things with you and God, and hopefully, a Christian counselor or something like that, that you could address some
Mm-hmm.
of those things of what the mask was trying to hide. Because if you just take off the mask without addressing anything under it, there'll just be another mask or some other way to cope. Because if that much pain, that deep
Yeah.
feeling of being unlovable isn't just a little thing, that's a really, really big thing. And then just taking off the mask isn't, it actually can be so scary, because you're like, well, if I'm actually myself and they don't love me for this, then it's just going to further
Yeah.
damage that wound that I already have. Versus, okay, here are these wounds. These are why I have these wounds with God. Talking with God about it
Mm-hmm.
and letting God, there's been so many things that God's revealed that I didn't know that He wants to do with us, of like, hey, this is how you saw it, and this is how you saw the situation. But he can really allow us to go with him. And I talk about this, me and Caleb talk about this later in the chapter, but be able to go with God back to some of those times, those defining moments that shaped us in a really negative way. And he can reshape the way that we see who he was in that moment, who we were, who others were. And one of the reasons that I had one of those really core things, I had some really disappointing, really scary things happen to me as a young person that really reinforced that I wasn't lovable. And because of those things, I God got what he went back with me. He went back with me and he re-showed me the people that I should have trusted that hurt me. He re-showed me the way to even see them and showed me that the way to see myself. And because of that, my vision was different. And when he healed those things to a deeper level, and I keep inviting him into those levels and seeing it more from his perspective, it's filled by his love. Like, so that actual place that behind the mask of unlovable, when that's filled more with God's love, and it just opens up a way to just be naturally more free in your heart. Caleb describes it like if you have a house and one of the rooms burnt down or it had damage in it, and you put caution tapes and you don't let anyone in that part of the room, and how that can be what's behind the mask. It feels like a burnt part of our house that no one's allowed, caution tape, no one enter. But Caleb says, he's like, well, God's the great carpenter and he can go into the room and he can fix the things that no one else can fix. And so that it can be something that the right people are able to be invited into that place of our hearts once it's healed.
Believers everywhere are called to preach the gospel with boldness to the ends of the earth. But what does that look like? How do we even initiate those kinds of conversations? What do we even tell our neighbor? Well, one of the best ways that we can show the gospel and share the gospel is by leading with our story. And what's our story full of? Hope. My friends Ron and Doug Hutchcraft made an amazing free resource for believers everywhere out there today, and it's called Your Hope Story. You can visit www.yourhopestory.com today and learn about the power of your hope story, what Jesus did in your life, and be able to communicate that to other people. I know that there's some fear involved, and maybe you're stepping out of your comfort zone. Well, with their curriculum and their 6 sessions, I'm sure that you will gain confidence and know how to share your hope story today. Again, that's www.yourhopestory.com. That's so good. And y'all even touch on that kind of towards the end of the book too, about allowing Jesus to come in and to heal the shame and to heal the pain and the sins and past mistakes from relationships or just life. And I love that. I love that y'all touch on those things, because I think it's easy for people to just want the method of like, I want my relationship to work, so like, what do I do to make it work? And it's like, well, you actually have to do a lot of stuff within yourself. Like, you have to do a lot of healing in order to love rightly, in order to have a fulfilling relationship and a godly relationship at that. And so I think it's really important, everything that you guys are talking about, and you're not afraid to address kind of the things that so many of us just want to like skip over. But it's like, no, that's actually the hard and necessary work in order to not just get into a relationship and to like find the right person, but for it to be sustainable and for it to be successful and fruitful and joyful and all these things that we want when it comes to wholehearted love. But moving on to another chapter, in chapter 4, Stuck in a Cycle, y'all address the toxic cycles of trigger points and coping mechanisms that we can enforce and that we can even rely on that actually end up causing our relationships to fail. Like, we rely on these things because this is what got me through the trauma. This is what got me through the last relationship. But now that I'm pursuing a healthy relationship or desire to, and I'm relying on these old coping mechanisms, it's not working. And it's actually causing more problems in the relationship. is it truly possible to break free from old coping mechanisms and ways of behaving? And kind of like what y'all talk about, like these collision points, is it actually possible to break free from the old ways of living and dealing with
Yeah.
pain?
I believe it is, and I've seen it a lot in my life and my clients' lives. It doesn't mean it's perfect or
Mm-hmm.
like there's new levels and there's new things that God can heal, and it's not. But I've seen it, and I talk about a story, and I think about this has happened. There's similar stories with several of my clients now, but the one story of one of my clients, she came to me and she kept getting back with an ex that had cheated on her. And she just felt so insane. She's like, I'm crazy, Steph. Like, why do I keep doing this? And the cycle she was in, this guy would tell her, you can't get anyone better than me. You know that I'm the best that you'll ever get. And
Dang.
then when she would come back, thinking about coming back, he would tell her all the things that she wanted to hear, just like, you're everything to me. Like, because you changed this, I won't do this next time, and put a lot of the blame on her. And, the cycle would continue. And eventually I mean, very soon, like her family did not like this guy, clearly, like hated this guy that kept
Mm-hmm.
cheating on her and not treating her right. And they would see her crying, upset, take him back. And then she started lying to her family. She'd keep taking him back because she felt like she believed that lie so much. He's the best I'll ever get. So if he's all I can get, I just better go back. If I was just a better girl, he wouldn't treat me so bad. So if I just get
Mm-hmm.
better, he'll treat me better. And so she kept getting back with this guy. This is the time I worked with her. She was with him when I started working with her. Her family did not know. So there was all these lies, and she loved her family, but she kept distancing herself from the people that really cared about her because she needed this other thing, that she was coping with this pain in such a toxic way. And through working with her and doing a lot of the things in this book, it's crazy. It's so cool how God just was able to break this cycle, that she didn't get back with this ex. And actually, in fact, in my time of working with her, she was able to restore the relationship with her family, confess and be able to like fully walk who she was before God and her family. And then also in time, she met an amazing guy. She's now married to an amazing guy. They got married several years ago, and
Wow.
he she's able to be like fully herself, both with her family and this guy. And she was also really
Mm.
scared, will this old relationship really impact my relationship with my husband? And she's come back to me multiple times and said, the things that you and I worked on has continually helped me, because I'm no longer seeing and being stuck in that, oh, I don't deserve anything. I'm need to just keep going back to these toxic things, all the old lies this person spoke over her life. But she keeps claiming the truth. And we have the enemy and other people that lie to us, and we can believe
Mm-hmm.
it, and then other people seem to enforce it, so it feels more true, and then it's that cycle, and then we're reinforcing that to other persons. But I believe as
Mm-hmm.
Jesus keeps healing, inviting into those darkest moments, healing it, showing him his truth, not just in our head, but to that deep place, that corner of the house that is locked away in our hearts, that when he
Mm-hmm.
gets there, he heals it. And then we're able to see other people's actions differently. And so it takes time. There's time early on in our marriage. And honestly, there's moments still that I can relapse into the same thinking patterns. But
Yeah.
because of the way that I was hurt and abused in past relationships, Caleb is this like kindest, most amazing man and husband. But there would be
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like even a tone of voice that triggered me to think, because of how I was hurt and abused in the past. I would even hear a tone of voice
Mm-hmm.
and it would trigger me down this trail. Oh, he's going to hurt me. He's going to do this. He never hurt me. He didn't. But other males did. And so I
Yeah.
incorporated that to Caleb, and then I was reactive and mean, and that's like, and then he was worked more into my how I viewed him. Like when I was treated him more
Mm-hmm.
mean or attacking, and he would get more defensive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, so it
Mm-hmm.
felt so true. When I see it, when I he has a tone of voice, and I'm able to see it in a different way, like see him and that as not a personal
Mm-hmm.
attack, and just even sometimes literally I'll stop and be like, God, this really triggered me. This really triggered this place of abuse. And God, will you just come in again? Because the things that shaped us when we were really little and in our formative years, it's easy to just resort back to that old frame of mind, and just it's
Yeah.
such a cycle. It's like this old tape that keeps playing in our head, and even though we eject it, it can come back so easily.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes ejecting the old tape and inviting God again, but I do believe that there is freedom, and there's more and more freedom to be had as we keep walking with Jesus and seeing his newness. So
100%. I am so glad that you touched on that. And because this is something that even like I'm working through present day, if I'm being like completely transparent and y'all are seeing into my life, that just from trauma from my own life of, okay, why am I perceiving this person, Richard, like, why am I perceiving him as this person who
yes.
hurt me? Because that's not Richard's intentions. That's not where he's coming from. And it's so easy to view other people through our lens of shame, our lens of trauma, our lens of hurt, our lens of coping. But truly and humbly, this is like a humbling and sobering thing to do too, to just set that down and really try and take it for what it is, like what these people are trying to communicate to us, how they're trying to love us, or I don't know, whatever the communication is, they're really trying to work together on that, and seeing them for from their best intention with what they're communicating, what they're trying to do, and not attributing the worst of other people onto them. That's something that we all have to work through, and I'm glad that y'all talk about that in the book, because I think a lot of us struggle with that and we don't even realize it, and that's why there are points of contention in relationships. But we can all work through them, but we also have to be willing to work through those things and to lay those things down and not attribute them to the people that truly, genuinely love us most. But as we work towards the end of this episode, I just want to know, is there something that you guys, or you specifically, have written in your book that you're like, this is one of my favorite things that to talk about. This is one of my favorite points. This is the thing that I wish everybody knew, and that if anybody reads this book, I'm most excited for them to read this little bit. Like, is there one thing that sticks out to you? I'm sure there's many things, but is there one thing in general that maybe off the top of your head that we didn't talk about yet that you're like, wait, I really want people to know about
Oh
this?
my gosh, that's a hard question. But there's so many things. I'm like, it just
Uh-huh.
like everything all together, because I think there's so many things that build upon, like building
Yeah.
blocks, and that's kind of how we structured the book and the course. But I would say the thing that came to mind right away is just so, I guess, the word of judgment, like the judgment on ourselves and
Mm.
the judgment we have towards other people. How I believe when we see things through God's eyes more, and his perspective of how he sees us, that we just are so set free to love and be loved. And I just think
Yeah.
this story of that we can just perceive our situation so differently than how God would view the situations. And even if we look in the Bible and we
Yeah.
see people and we get the bird's eye view of their story, but they don't have that view in that moment. So isn't it the same with us, and
So
how
true.
I was, and still can be at times, just so mean to myself. And I work with so many women, I'm going to get emotional, that are just so mean to themselves, and um, just have been so judged by the world. Like, even that little me that was, I remember going to this Christian event, and I was dressed like really like, yeah, just in like a really short skirt, and like, just
Mm-hmm.
very like belly top, like showing my belly and my, everything,
Mm-hmm.
and just being so judged by the women there. And how it's so easy as for us to judge women, or to put labels on people, or to see them. But if
Mm-hmm.
when I unlock my client stories, like looking under the layers, there's a lot of times a reason why people are coping, whether even in things of like drugs and alcohol, or, how they dress, or how they decide to do life,
Hookup culture,
all of
all
those
that.
things. It's so easy to
Hmm.
judge, and that doesn't make it right. And it's not, when we sin, it's sin. And it's the thing
Hmm.
that I would love anyone listening to it is that, that shame doesn't separate you from God forever. Like, you can bring that to Him, and He can free you, and that also free you to see other people. Because when I think of my clients, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart just expands knowing their story. I'm like, of course you're doing that. Of course you've gone to those things. Let's go to a better thing together. And it's not always safe earlier. Sometimes people didn't even hear about Jesus, or they didn't have a safe home to be raised in, and they didn't have a way to
Yeah.
receive it. And just, um, how beautiful that is to walk that out. And for any wives listening, or any husband, it's just like, our spouses also have a whole story of pain that they've walked through. And how beautiful, instead of taking it
Yes.
personally, which we're so easily offended, instead of by every, like, I know, at least I can be, I don't know, but
Hmm.
in our culture it's so easy to get offended, instead of being like, wow, this person is made in God's image. They have their own hurts and pains, and Lord, help me to see them through your eyes. Help me to see myself through your eyes, and to see who you
Hmm.
are. So I guess that would be something that I really believe the book can do. And then I see, when people walk this out, not only are they having better relationships with their spouses, or being able to set up for a healthier marriage, I see the way that they are able to just see the world and themselves differently, and walking into their purpose, and walking in, even as things come at them, of being like, of just knowing the truth, and not listening to the lies of the
Hmm.
enemy in a fuller state. So
That's so good. You got me emotional. I'm like, I relate. I relate, and my heart breaks for the same things. So I love that y'all are talking about it. Um, but as we wrap up the episode, y'all's book is available everywhere. Wholehearted Love is already out. Look at it if you're watching the video. That's what it looks
I have
like.
our
It's
book
so
side by
cute. Ah, and there's my book. Side by side, add it to your summer reading list, Wholehearted Love, and You Can Be Free.
side.
Both are available everywhere books are sold. Um, but yeah, their book is available now. Like I said, Wholehearted Love, the little tagline with it: overcome the barriers that hold you back in your relationship with God and others, and delight in feeling safe, seen, and loved. It's by Stefanie and Caleb Rouse, and y'all can get it everywhere. But Stefanie, where can people keep up with you guys? Like, do you have social media? Do you have a website? I know that you do coaching and you help a lot of people. So can you kind of tell everybody a little bit about those things before we
Yeah,
sign
so my
off?
Instagram, it's at Stefanie.Rouse, Stefanie. And Caleb's is at Caleb Jason Rouse. And our website is stephanieandcaleb.com. And so we have so many resources. We have a ton of free devotionals, and things that you can get plugged into our resources. And there's information of being part of our mentorship programs, and our different things that we can meet face to face, and one on one, and in groups that we do. We have marriage courses, we have single courses, we have things for people that are engaged and dating. So we have a lot of things for your relationships, and then things for your relationship with God too, to grow in your relationship. So that's all on stephanieandcaleb.com.
Sweet. I already know some people I'm going to be sending this episode to because I'm like, we got to do the work. We got to do
Yeah,
the work.
and I want to say to
For real.
that, it's like sometimes that can feel so daunting, but I believe that
Yeah.
Jesus wants to do it. So, like, it can be daunting if you have a wall of your house closed up, but if you have the best carpenter in the world that
Hmm.
you know is going to come and make it more beautiful than you can imagine, it's less scary. And that's the way that God wants to do it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't come without things, that can be difficult, but it's so worth it.
So true. Well, I love you, Stefanie, and I'm so happy that you got to come on the pod. And to everyone who's just tuning in and listening, I really hope that this episode ministered to you. And if this is a topic that you just want to grow in, you want to know more about this, if you want to just unpack the things that maybe have led to failed relationships or broken relationships, or maybe even an incomplete view of God or yourself, definitely check out their book. But until next week, I love you guys, and yeah, see you next week for next week's episode. Bye.